Afternoon, everyone. I'll be types of gender. So let's first start with what is gender. So gender is really defined as how a individual identifies them internally, and it also includes how they express themselves externally to the external environment that is present. So now, the internal identification is more of a internal perception that they have of themselves and who they view themselves to be. While now, how they express themselves can express depends more so on their like appearances, clothing, and behaviors to express the gender that they wish to, the gender identity that they wish to show to the outside world. So now the World Health Organization has specified the definition of gender as a social construction that people typically describe in the terms of femininity and masculinity. This is how it is usually is in the social constructions. This is how it's usually depicted: femininity and masculinity. Now, if we move on to the dimensions or the dimensions that come under the gender. First would be biological gender. It basically refers to a person's anatomy, which is assigned and the assigned sex that they receive at birth. It can be male, female, or intersex, and it depends on a person's genes and their sex organs and the chromosomes that they have. While now gender identity is more so the individual's sense of who they are. It is their intense internal perception of who they are, and it cannot be determined by their sexual organs or even the societal expectations or the gender roles that they're meant to follow. It is solely internally depicted by them, and that is what is gender identity. Now, gender expression is how they wish to express themselves to the outside society. Now, this could be through appearance, clothing, behavior, the pronouns they wish to use, or they may adapt a new name to better suit their gender identity. This basically is because sometimes the gender, biological gender, may not align with their gender identity. Thus, they may use gender expression to better express who they are and who they internally. Now, but gender it can be viewed as a spectrum within where we place it between femininity and masculinity. It is a spectrum there. Thus, that's why we can say that gender is not binary. The lines of gender is male and female, where they are defined as man and woman. So now, when gender identities in, it can go beyond the idea of the binary ideas of male and woman. So when we go beyond the binary, it is necessary to explain gender as a spectrum where people may fall anywhere within the spectrum between the male and feminine side, or they may even fall completely out of the spectrum where they don't view themselves as either male or female or anything in between as well. So because of because gender is viewed as a spectrum, it can also this can be why there are so many gender identities out there, so that so that everyone who falls within the spectrum has a specific identity that they can refer to themselves as. Genders also can be fluid, basically, meaning that people's gender identities can move between the spectrum and change according to how they view themselves as time passes by. So there are countless other gender identities that are present within the binary. These are the ones that are accepted by the society, which is mainly male and female, and it is on someone's anatomy. This is within the binary, and these are the only two genders that are accepted. Now, beyond the binary are the genders that are not. That go away from the traditional roles of male and female, and they involve the genders that come from a spectrum, which can include gender neutral, non binary, agender, pangender, two spirit, uh, etc., etc., where there could also be a combination of these genders, because as I said, gender is a spectrum. Thus there's possibilities of overlaps between the gender identities within the spectrum. Gender is, as I also said, is fluid. meaning they fluctuate between these. Thus, it does not necessarily mean that they are stuck to one specific label of gender identity, which it could differ and change as they move on and live their life. It's, as I said, gender is a spectrum, and there are no definite amount of gender identities. It's a spectrum, thus there could be infinite amount of gender identities that can be formed. So I would now like to cover some of the uh, major ones that we hear a lot when we are interacting with the community. So now we have cisgender. Cisgender is basically a person who identifies with the sex that they're assigned at birth. So now, if a baby is born with the XX chromosome and they do feel themselves to be female, and their gender identity is woman, thus they will be a cisgendered woman or a cisgendered female. So next would be transgender. This is an umbrella term and it encompasses all the people who experience gender identity that is not within the binary. They do not assign themselves to the sex that they're assigned at birth, and they view and their gender identity is different from their biological gender. So then we have trans, whereas it's a more inclusive term that covers those who identify themselves as non-binary and genderless. So even if they may be born with either male or female genitals or intersex, they view themselves as completely genderless. They do not have a specific gender. They're non-binary. This is basically so that they feel that we're not calling them trans male or trans female, so they can refer to themselves as just trans to feel more accepted. So now these are the classifications that fall under transgender. We have, because transgender is an umbrella term, now we have non-binary. Now non-binary are basically people who do not experience gender within the gender binary, which is male and female. They overlap with other gender identities and gender expressions, as in they can express themselves in a more masculine or feminine way, or they even may not express themselves in either of them. They can express themselves in a way not conforming to the gender expression roles that are given by society. That's a non-binary person. Now, agender is an individual who does not identify with gender at have a gender identity. They perceive themselves as genderless, neutral, they have no gender labels. Now, bigender is when individuals experience two or distinct gender identities. They may switch between and contain expressions of both masculinity and femininity. Gender fluid, as we said, it's a spectrum. So they have shifts in their gender identity over time. So their gender is not consistent and they flow between the spectrum. And it can be their gender identity can vary based on the different points of the gender spectrum. Additional types of gender identity that people may have not heard of as much. And the first one would omnigender. These people, for them, they gender as in the sense that they possess all the genders. They feel like they are every gender possible. Now, polygender and pangender are those who experience and display parts of multiple genders. Gender queer is an umbrella term that is used for individuals who the binary understanding. They want to go beyond the binary, and that's identify themselves. They are a combination of genders and they have fluid gender identity. Now, two spirit is basically when someone holds more of a spiritual role or a religious role in their communities, but they view themselves as they embody both masculine and feminine qualities. They are two spirit. Now, demigender individuals identify partially with one gender and partially with another, or maybe none at all. So they are called demigirl, demiboy, and demi non-binary. Now, gender questioning are individuals who are questioning and exploring their gender identity. They're not sure of what their gender identity is. Thus, it is a very important stage when we come to gender identification and self internal perception, and it should be very supported and respected that they're unaware of what they would label themselves their gender as. Androgyne is a person who has a gender that is neither is either both masculine or feminine, or it's between masculine and feminine. They not refer themselves as masculine or feminine, they more so in between both of them. Now, gender expression. As we mentioned before, gender expression is how they wish to portray themselves to the external environment. This could include makeup, appearances, dress, their body languages, their mannerisms, as well as their pronouns and their chosen pronouns and names. So now there are different types of how people can express gender. The first is masculine. They take up more masculine mannerisms where they dress in a masculine way and they put makeup in, or they don't wear makeup. So more of what is considered by traditional society as masculine is what they take up and their gender expression. Now, feminine is where they dress up and do their hair in a more in a more feminine form according to the traditional roles where they gender roles where they maybe dress up with more makeup, where they wear more dresses, where mannerisms, where their voices may be slightly more high pitched. These are more feminine gender expressions that people may want to take up. Now, the third is gender neutral. Gender neutral gender expression is basically when they don't confine to either masculine or feminine. They are uh, completely separate from that. They don't specify their gender expression as male or female. This can be maybe expressed when they take pronouns such as they and them rather than she, him, or so that they are separate from the binary and they do not want to be part of the binary. Now, androgynous, as mentioned, androgynous is as mentioned. They both are They take they shift between masculine and feminine identities. They may be more masculine one day and more feminine one day. This would be their gender expression. Now, gender conforming is basically when someone conforms to the gender role. So, if a female is wearing a dress, that would be gender conforming. So, gender conforming gender expression is basically when they are presenting themselves in in as conformed to a specific gender. Now, gender non-conforming is basically when they don't conform to the gender roles and they go something out of what is confined by that. So, for example, maybe a female wearing a tie or maybe wearing a more masculine outfit would be considered gender non-conforming by the society. So now we can talk about some gender affirmation and support. Pronouns. Pronoun is a very important aspect of gender identity. It is important to respect how um, their individual preferred pronouns and use them correctly because it is part of their gender identity and how they express themselves. And it is necessary that we not deny them of this basic right. Now, gender dysphoria, as already was covered before, gender dysphoria is a condition where individuals experience distress to a disconnect between their gender identity and assigned sex. So it is important to provide them an environment where they can feel free enough be to affirm their own gender, like through gender affirming healthcare, where they can transition. Say perhaps they don't feel comfortable in a female body, maybe they can transition into a more male body. So it is important to provide them that transition and the cross dressing maybe to make them more comfortable within their own body so that their gender identity and gender expression is respected. Now, legal recognition is very, very important because legal recognition is where we have certain people are called she, her, and he, him, and they, them is mostly not even considered. It is very binary based. Thus, it is important that they get legal recognition and protection for who they view themselves as and their own gender. Many countries have brought this into aspect, but it is not very prevalent in India, which is something we should bring about. Yeah, so that is it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Urshita, to presenting the different side of gender.